If there's one city in the world people think about when it comes to nightlife, it's Berlin. Berlin has a lot to offer. It's a cosmopolitan city with a vibrant cultural scene. It's got great record shops, restaurants, cafes, parks, museums, a proximity to water, and also just a general attitude of tolerance from its inhabitants. This attitude makes this city very unique, very original, and creative. Berlin can count on many little details that makes it stand out. There's karaoke in a park, disco photo booths, and venues and clubs open all weekend long. Well, that's not quite a detail, actually. Here with me today is Lutz Leichsenring, spokesman and board member of Club Commission Berlin. It's a professional association aiming at preserving and developing Berlin's club culture. His organization has produced a short film called Stadt Ohne Morgen that we will be watching very soon. And this film explains why Berlin's clubs don't have a curfew. So hi, Lutz.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us today. So tell me, how do you translate Stadt Ohne Morgen in English?
It's city without morning.
City without morning. So
yeah, or without tomorrow. It's both. Right.
Why is the film called The City Without Morning?
Well, because Berlin is since 1949 a 24-hour city. So that means we don't have any curfew. And I think it's very special that people basically can do whatever they want at any time at the day or night. And I think it also created a special type of scene where all kinds of ages and generations are going out, and not just the, let's say, 20 to 29-year-olds who go clubbing. It's really across all ages.
So, but why is it that Berlin's club can go on without a curfew?
Well, there is a story behind it, and I think it's worth watching the movie to learn about this. But I can tell you as so much that as there was after World War II, there was a time when there was a very strict curfew, which was, I think, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. And Berlin was divided in two sectors. In the sector of the Allies, the Americans, the French, and the British, and the Russians on the other side. And people went out until they were able to. I think it was until 9 p.m. in the Western sector. And then they used the other hour in the Eastern sector to go out. And of course, that was not something the Americans and the British liked, and so they changed it, and they created basically a city without a curfew.
But today, well, maybe not today, but before the pandemic, tell me, is it all the bars and clubs and restaurants that can close whenever they want?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So how come you don't have any zoning problems or problems with noise and residents and stuff like that?
We have, we have, but it's not depending on the hour, because I think it's the noise in venues you can really regulate very well with noise diminution, with soundproofing. You can really work around that, but of course, there is a curfew to use outside areas. So if you want to have a bar with an outside area, you have curfews. So it's basically the beer gardens, they close, I think, at 10 or 11 p.m. Okay. So people can go to sleep, or neighbors.
But you have outdoor venues too in Berlin, no?
We have outdoor venues, but they also either they don't have any trouble with their neighbors, so they can go on, or they have to also close down at a certain time at night.
Do you think Berlin has, because of this, that Berlin has more noise complaints than anywhere else? But when I often talk about clubs that don't close in Berlin, people have this idea of, they kind of picture it like Cancun, like having a strip of bars. And so is it like that in Berlin? Are all the clubs concentrated in the same area? And is it like a touristic neighborhood?
Yeah, there's some conglomeration happening in some areas, but Berlin is actually the size of the city is much bigger than the population. So, for instance, I think Berlin has the size of New York, but only a third of its inhabitants. So the houses are not as skyrocketing, of course, and it's just more space in the city. And so it's losing a bit of its space because Berlin is getting more attractive and a lot of more people are moving to the city. So it's getting a bit more dense in the city center, and we also have more problems with neighbors because of that. But there is a misconception, perception. There is not necessarily more noise complaints when you have longer opening hours, because people stay longer in clubs and maybe go home at 10 in the morning or at 8 in the morning. And when you have a curfew, people will be thrown out at, let's say, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., but all at the same time. So you have much more noise in that time when people go out and have to leave the venues, maybe don't know where to go, maybe don't want to go anywhere. And that creates much more noise and trouble. And to this, there comes binge drinking, where people really want to get drunk until they leave the venue. And you also don't have this in a relaxed atmosphere when you don't really have to go home. You can stay there until the next day, till noon if you want to.
Can you drink outside freely in the parks or in the street, in the metro in Berlin?
Yes, it's. I think it's not official, but there is a high tolerance of the people of the public trains and also the public services, that it's a lot of tolerance towards that people walk with the beer. There's actually a say or a word for this. It's called Wegebier, the beer for the way. So
beer to go. Okay.
Beer to go. Yeah.
We have the same saying here, but it's totally not tolerated at all. So, but is there more incivilities because of this, like fights at night and stuff like that, because people are drunk on the streets?
I mean, I think when you talk to the police in Berlin, they will tell you that all the complaints they have and all the problems are relatively low when it comes to really severe fights, severe alcoholic violence. It is a very peaceful city, also, and it shows in the numbers. But of course, we have a lot of complaints also, because there's just a lot more nightlife than in many other cities. About 23% of all the tourists are coming because of nighttime to Berlin. The turnover of tourists in the city who are just coming because of nighttime is 1.5 billion euros per year. So there is also a lot of spending. People go out, and of course, then you also have some complaints. But from my personal perspective, I think there are more complaints with Airbnb, illegal Airbnb parties, than with a club, because a club wants to have a good relationship with their neighbors, and they take care with security and so forth, that there are not so many complaints.
I often hear that all the freedoms you enjoy in Berlin is because Germans are very disciplined. I guess you've heard that before, and that's why you can enjoy these freedoms. And we wouldn't be able to do this anywhere else, or in a Latin country, or in the UK or the States. You must have heard that too. What do you say to this? Do you think it's a model we can export and do somewhere else?
I think people enjoy the freedom they have in Berlin to go out, but also there's also a sense for responsibility in the same time. So I think it's a good showcase, actually, that if you give people trust and not forbid everything, that you also get paid back in a certain way, that people maybe look better for each other, be aware a bit more about themselves. Because we don't have that much, let's say, teenagers who take overdoses of drugs and have to go get hospitalized, because it's just not a big thing in the scene that people experiment. Of course, for teenagers, let me correct this. But the more you're kind of mature with it, and the more you kind of know how to know your limits. It even starts with alcohol. You can drink beer when you're 16 in Germany. You know, it's just not that pressure that you had to do something illegal. And yeah, I lived in the US for a couple months, and I saw, you know, if the drinking age is 21, how people get crazy when they're 15 or 16, and I think it's not as big of a deal when it's legal and you can buy a beer anywhere.
It has less attraction when it's legal. It's not as you know, mysterious, and also I think if you treat people like adults, they will behave like adults. So yeah, you're right. Um, but one would think we have this idea, especially maybe in North America, that you know the whole club scene. It's if you have more clubs, you're gonna have more dirty money, more mafia, more criminals. Is there more criminality in Berlin? Are the clubs, you know, because there's more bars and clubs? Do you have this type of problem over there?
The Berlin music scene is very much created by people who were squatting houses or were artists or promoters. They're not this kind of nighttime which is created by mafia. I'm sure there is also some mafia in Berlin. I don't want to be too optimistic, but the people that I know that are running clubs, which are, let's say, music-driven clubs which are promoted with artists, with lineups, the clubs which are curating a program. They're people from their artistic scenes. They're not scenes who are investors putting up some bars and having a rental agreement for 20 years and say, let's sell some alcohol and play some chart music and do some bottle service. That is not a scene that we have in Berlin. The scene in Berlin is very much artistic and music driven. And so I think you don't have this much of a problem with that kind of mafia structures in the clubs. Of course, there are mafia structure when it comes to drugs, because that is in control of the mafia or clans.
I heard nightclubs are now being considered as high art, like museums in Berlin, and they'll get a different tax rate because of this. But what about these commercial clubs? Are they more the ones that are more business oriented? Is there any in Berlin? Are they part of your association? Are all clubs and discotheques and bars culture? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, there is a line being drawn actually, and some of them, you know, some of them are maybe in a gray zone because they have a commercial side, but also maybe a more music curated side because they have maybe to pay high rents, and so they have to make a compromise. But most of the clubs that we are representing are the so-called curated music venues. We also talk about live music venues, and also DJ sets are considered as live music if there is an artist performing. If there's somebody just playing the charts, the top 40 hits, we don't consider this person as an artist, who maybe is an own a producer, and people basically want to see that artist performing. That's why they come to that venue. And not because they know that R&B hits from the radio is being played at that venue, you know. So I think it's value the venues who are valuing the music more and have it maybe a bit more in focus, and not the entertainment, not the socializing part, which is also always part of clubbing, but it's maybe the profile of why to go to this venue is made by the artistic program, and not because you have cheap alcohol or something.
So, what are some of the positive effects of having clubs go late in the morning or not closing at all? How has this shaped Berlin's identity? And
I think the idea when people talk about Berlin, they have basically two kind of perceptions. One is it's the city of the unfinished. So things are not all clean, ready, done. So people still think there's something in progress. I want to be part of this progress. I want to be part of of a project. And I think that is also very attractive for artists and for creative people to be part of something, and not just everything is sealed, done, ready, you know. And so this is, I think, one of the parts. And also the club culture is pretty much representing this idea, because clubs are also not looking so nice and tidy in Berlin. They are usually like some rundown venues, and but the sound is good, the drinks are affordable, and the people who are there are really celebrating that moment. And I think that is something which is appreciated. And secondly, the city of freedom, kind of, because you have no curfew, because you can be who you want to be. The people are very tolerant in the city. You can wear whatever you want. You can be part of any kind of. You can be attracted to any to anybody you like. Sexual preferences are basically not existent. You know, you kind of do what you feel you want to do, as long as you're respecting the other person. And I think that is something where people feel really attracted to this, because it's usually not something you can experience in any other city in the world.
One other things we often think about when you think about Berlin clubs is the strict door policy, where people are picked at the door by bouncers. This from North America might be perceived as something very elitist, but when you experience it in Berlin, it doesn't feel so much. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and why it's important to the club scene that you don't let anybody go in?
Well, we did actually a study around this, and you can download the study also in English on our website. So the idea of club culture, what is the definition of it? A lot of people are using it, and we basically defined that a club has to have three elements which needs to be in place. One is, it needs to be an independent organization and basically creates its own fundament for financing. So make own income, not be dependent to one brand or to government. So you can be an independent organization. Secondly, it has to be a space which has a certain aesthetic. Aesthetic means a certain idea about the space looks like, about the programming, the curation of artists, about a certain niche genre you're kind of heading to. So the aesthetic of that space is very relevant. And then number three, it's a social space. And that also means that it's not for everybody. It's for a certain group. And if you have an event which is for gays, then it might be not so relevant for a person who is heterosexual, and you're not part of that club. So part of a club means that there's also somebody who's kind of curating the night, somebody who is cultivating what's happening behind those doors. And it's not easy because some spaces are central in the city. A long line of people wants to get into this club, and there needs to be a door who makes sure that the people behind those doors also are a harmonic group, people who are really kind of connect to each other on every level. And for this, club culture is not possible to happen on every market square. You know, it's something which needs to be behind behind the door, or it can also be a festival. But curation, I think, is a very important part of it.
Yeah, I like how you bring it back to the original definition of a club as an association or a group, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, when you have a group, not everyone belongs in the group, or sometimes, and some, you know, but if you don't belong in one group, you might find another group
Exactly.
that will accept you.
Or you grow into it, you know. I think a lot of people who are new to the city, who just moved here, they're not going to the most best known clubs. They go to niche clubs somewhere at the outskirts of the city center, maybe, you know, be invited on a Sunday morning to a party or on a Wednesday night. So not just Friday, Saturday, you know, and then you make contacts, you get to know people, you learn maybe the artists, the people who are working at that space, and then you become friends with them, you connect to them, and then they put you on a guest list to the next party. You know, you're kind of getting, you're kind of growing into that scene, and then you are part of the club. And then it's also at the end, if you're part of the club for a certain time, probably not a problem to get in any club. But that is also a process, and it's not just that you stand in line, you have a lot of money in your hand, and you get in. That's not how club culture should supposed to be.
So tell us a little bit about the team that made this movie and why you decided to produce it.
Yeah, so Charlotte is a director who approached us, and Timo, the producer, together. They thought about having this idea because we celebrated 70 years of no curfew, and we said we have to kind of document this and to talk to some iconic people, but also to some very young and some people who are very new to the scene. And also to show the story behind that there is no curfew, which is also very interesting to know, which is very special and coincidental. So we had a conference last year where we screened it at the first time, and now that we are in lockdown and clubs are closed because of COVID, I think it gets another relevance, because you know now what you're missing. You know, you see that what that city was really about, and I think it's also for us now to really promote this movie, to show people who live in that city that of course there's a downside when there is a vibrant nightlife, because it's maybe more noise, more litter, but you know, the downside is that the city is just not as it is anymore. You know, it's just losing part of its DNA if you don't have this kind of vibrancy there. And yeah, I think it's good to show this and to get a feeling what you're missing in these times.
Yeah, I think we're realizing the same here, even though it's quite far from being Berlin. But having it going this summer now with no cultural events at all makes downtown very quiet. Very quiet. So, well, thank you, Lutz, for your time, and I hope we can get back on the dance floor soon when this situation is all over.
Hopefully. We are counting the days.
À bientôt. Thank you, Lutz.
À bientôt. Merci.
Merci.